If you like this video, make sure to subscribe to Downfall Network for more cool content.
What's up, everyone? Thralls Metal here once again. I'm Necrotic Nick.
Miller.
And we're back with a retro review. So, again, we wanted to find something that was kind of a one-off and a little obscure, and one that always seemed to come up on lists of, like, greatest one-off albums in terms of metal, was God Macabre's Lone Offering the Winterlong. This originally came out on the 13th of December in 1993 on MBR Records, which I'm really not familiar with.
No. Germany, right?
Germany, I believe. Their lone studio release. The only reason I found it was because it was reissued by Relapse Records, I believe, in 2002, and then again in 2014, and I picked it up on a whim and then looked up the history behind it and was like, oh wow, these guys were actually one of the original Swedish death metal bands, technically, and they weren't related to Nihilist, which is kind of strange, because Nihilist pretty much gave birth to Entombed and Dismember and Unleashed.
Yeah.
These guys were kind of their own thing.
Yeah, and I came into them, let's see, it was about an hour ago.
So
when he mentioned it, yeah.
I just thought this would be an interesting album to cover because it is clearly very much in that vein of all those bands we just brought up, but there's also some subtle differences.
In a good way, yeah.
I mean, you're an elite company then.
So you said it was death metal, and my idea, and we had a good conversation earlier about it, and I was like, dude, save it. Save it for the camera. and we were going into it though, and I had the idea about death metal, and then you brought up the difference in how it came to be. You know, the U.S.
Yep, we had our thrash metal stuff here in the U.S. That's where a lot of that Tampa sound came from. There was a lot of thrash in it. You know, Deicide, you definitely hear that. Cannibal Corpse. Now, when you get to Sweden with again Entombed and Dismember, they didn't have the biggest thrash scene, but the D-beat stuff, the hardcore punk, became a huge part of that Swedish sound. And of course, they decided to dime their wonderful little Metal Zone pedal, and it was like, that makes a really crunchy, mean sound.
A lot of that punk stuff comes out in this album.
Oh, 100%.
Is totally fucking cool, you know, and it gives it a unique sound. Coming into it thinking death metal like I was.
Yep.
And I hear it, I'm like, this is like more up my alley, really.
Little backstory though. These guys formed in 1991, technically. Now, they actually started in 1988, and they were known as Botten Pa Burken, which is Swedish for something. I have no idea what that means.
Really?
Botten Pa Burken.
Okay, that's the first time I've seen that.
3 words. But then they changed their name to Macabre End, and were that for a little bit from 1989 to 1991. And then they became God Macabre from 1991 to 1992. Now, we said this came out in 93. This actually came out sort of posthumously for the band. But it became sort of a big underground buzz, and with good reason.
Yeah, good reason. It's well reviewed, and it pays homage to that early 90s death metal and punk and
thrash.
Everything in thrash.
It's there too.
Really thrashy, man.
Nods to Black Sabbath too.
Oh, a lot.
In terms of things that really stood out for me on this album is almost those Death Doom breaks.
Yeah, which are fantastic.
Just drops right out, and the sludgiest, slowest stuff comes out with these really, they're beautiful for death metal in terms of melodies. Anyone else, it's kind of creepy, and, people like us were like, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It fits that sort of mode. There's a lot of cool, harmonies and such. It has a lot of atmosphere with really using not that much.
Yeah, that's what I was going to mention. We were talking earlier. You brought that up earlier, was that they create that really dark, that typical, we're the graveyard thing, being dull death metal, which is cool. They do it with such little stuff. And nowadays it's so overly, I think it's so overly done and overly processed, overly thought and saturated with all this. Let's put all these things in here, and it doesn't need to be that, and this proves it.
It's pretty much just a straightforward band, but they like to pepper in moments with keyboards. And it's not all over the place keyboards. We're like, we gotta hit because we haven't hit the keyboard in a while. It's like, no, this one moment kind of required it. It's a little extra ambience. And there's even a Mellotron on here, which was used really effectively as well.
Yeah. Although I think some of that stuff is mixed a tad too high, but that, it's fucking 1993.
Yeah. My issue is with the mix overall, I like the sound of it. I think the guitars just need to come up, and the vocals are very out in front. But the vocals are absolutely awesome on here.
Yeah, I enjoy them. Yeah.
Right away, in the opening track, Into Nowhere, that the first thing you hear is a big death metal, bleh, and it's loud, it's pronounced. But when you actually listen to like his cadences, they really kind of follow like kind of a punk hardcore delivery, and he's really clear, but it's still deep and gravelly and evil sounding.
Going back to that time period, there wasn't a whole hell of a lot of clarity in that time, especially in the U.S. scene. So I appreciate hearing this, and I wish I would have heard it, back then. But at that point, 93, I was into like fucking Vanilla Ice and like that. So. Yeah. The
biggest standouts on this album for me are Ashes of Morning Life and Spawn of Flesh. Those two songs alone had me hooked as soon as I heard them. This actually throws in maybe a little bit of US death metal, but more specifically Obituary, because it's very groove laden. It kind of has that bolt thrower stomp to it. It's just pretty much like a driving anthem. You get caught in that groove, and these are just instant headbangers.
And Ashes, thing I loved about that was that nasty breakdown. Just that timing and the way that felt was just sick, and it caught me off guard because, again, going into it thinking of the thrash-led death metal of the U.S., and that was just, it's wicked.
It just it feels murky and just swampy sound. I guess that's a good word for it. There's even a spot on there that it's a little bit like that death and roll sound. Like there's a little bit of like kind of bluesiness to the riff.
Yeah. I heard that too.
Yeah, Wolverine Blues, one of my favorite Entombed albums. I was like, okay, this is kind of in that same realm.
There was parts in the solos in the first couple songs that just boom, done.
Yep.
Dune, cut, and they're louder. This one, they actually faded out. So this was, again, why this song stuck out to me also was because everything flowed a little bit better and it was mixed and it tapered off in parts where it needed to and it hit hard, real hard where it needed to. Then, then we go into the Spawn of Flesh, which is just screams 90s death metal.
Right away, like the very opening of the song is just an absolute beatdown. Like just a slow, methodical riff, but it has that double time drive to it. It's pretty much, you can see the pit spinning already. Yeah. But the thing that really stood out to me, again, and just kind of an odd moment, but it's really catchy, is this kind of bluesy, bouncy sort of bridge on here that just screams Black Sabbath.
Oh yeah, it does. Black Sabbath all the way.
Black Sabbath is all over here, but in like kind of like unique doses. When you get down to that second instrumental, Lamentation, it's all acoustic, it's all pretty, and it reminds me a lot of Laguna Sunrise, which is one of the best Black Sabbath albums on Volume 4. And that's kind of like the odd thing, like I think like this is almost like death metal meets Volume 4 in some spots because it has those flat out Sabbath style riffs.
Then think about how many death metal albums were inspired by Volume 4. So you could just put that phrase and X band, really.
All metal.
But some represent it better than others, and this is an example that is better than others, I think.
Yeah. And when it comes down to like being fast and up tempo, like that's kind of more pockmarked. Like when it comes down to like the thrashier stuff, that's stuff that's much more similar to like Pestilence. You get more of the groove laden stuff, but you get spots in songs like In Grief and Lost that are definitely more up tempo and thrashy. It's just when it comes down to the faster stuff, they really labored the D beat, which I love the D beat. The D beat's fun. Yeah, that's the fast mosher.
Yeah, and that's one of my favorite parts about the genre, really. That gravitate, because honestly, the vocals usually I could go without or whatever. I originally wasn't like when I heard death metal, I was like, I don't know if I can get past the vocals, but the everything else is so badass, and I trained my ear to like push it aside.
It's another layer.
Yeah, and then I started hearing bands like Cannibal Corpse and good examples of it, and I was like, oh, okay, so this is an instrument I can really hear it now. But yeah, my initial, I don't even remember the first couple bands I heard, but they were awful, and I couldn't. I was like, screw this, I'm good with like Metallica and whatever. But
I mean, it took me some time too, but. Yeah, when it came down to like the Swedish death metal stuff, I think I was already like super big into death metal, and this was just something different within that same genre. Same thing when like I first started listening to melodic death metal. I was like, this is still death metal, but it's different because I don't know, different areas, different styles, different species of death metal, I guess.
Yeah, and I like that. I like that, dude. That's good. Yeah, and it fits too. And I wish I'm looking at some of the other bands from that area, and I recognized some of the other bands and stuff that I had liked. I was like, I didn't associate Swedish death metal with it because I didn't know. I didn't dig into it, but you're the encyclopedia.
I am. So overall, I'm going to give this 4 stars. This is an awesome offering, and there's a good reason why a lot of people see this as a cool underground one-off favorite. It's very much like a lot of the stuff that came out, courtesy of Nihilist breaking up and forming all those cool bands, but they have some stuff that is a little bit different on there that really sets them apart. And it sucks they never released anything else, at least on the God Macabre banner, but I'm glad they have this one album, which is absolutely awesome, that I can jam anytime, because this is killer. Check it out. Definitely.
Definitely agree. Said definitely a lot.
Yep.
Probably. The thing, definitely. We definitely said definitely a lot in that, but I definitely agree that it's a 4 out of 5. So, and it's solid too. And I was even leaning like a little more because it really took me back to a lot of different bands and stuff, and not in death metal. That's the cool part about this, is I was reminded of bands like thrashy bands and punk bands and stuff like that, and seeing some of those, like you can hear Sabbath in there, and then you hear what they're doing in this, and then you can hear that song later in Phil's Illegals or Superjoin or whatever.
Discharge, or it's really all over the place, and that's just sort of the fun thing about it.
Yeah, and what's fun about this album is that it takes you in those different areas and places. So I was even moving to like 4 or 5, and I was like, man, geez, I'm gonna blow my load here in the first couple videos, leave no room for perfection.
I mean,
it's like Black Sabbath 5, 5, everything's a 5.
I might give Master Reality a 5. So once again, these guys did break up in 1992. This didn't come out until 93, and all the other members kind of went off and did their own thing. The lead guitarist on here actually is the current lead guitarist or co-lead guitarist in At the Gates, Jonas Stahlhammer. Mm-hmm. And he's been a good fit. He was on their last album, and he'll be on their next album, which I believe they're in the studio working on.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
At the Gates will be back.
Oh.
And the vocalist actually went on to sing for a band called Mordebrand, which is also Swedish death metal and a little bit more gritty and heavy. Okay. I believe they have 2 or 3 albums. I have 2 of their albums, and actually the first album I got from them came courtesy of the Metalhead box.
Oh, nice. Yeah, you've talked about that. It's pretty cool.
It was a good find.
Yeah.
And their drummer, Tobias Gustafsson, I'm terrible with foreign pronunciation. He went on to drum for Vomitory and Cut Up and Niflheim, I believe. So these guys mostly all found different work. I believe it was the other guitarist who really hasn't done a tremendous amount. I think there was one other band he did. But you can still see these members out there, and they are technically still together. They reunited in 2013, but they haven't released anything. So I think maybe they're just going as a touring band. I mean, there's plenty of bands out there that tour on one album.
Or they're doing the Tool method and taking 15 years.
Yeah. I mean, well...
It didn't work for Tool.
It didn't work for Tool.
Maybe it'll work for them.
Maybe. I mean, honestly, if God Macabre came back and wrote a new album, I would be 100%
stoked.
On it. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd have that shit pre-ordered now, man.
100%. Because this is just, again, a great little one-off album, and I thoroughly encourage you guys to check this out if you already haven't heard of it.
Absolutely agree. And I thoroughly encourage everybody to hit the subscribe button. Hit the bell, the notification, or slam it or pop it or whatever you want to do to it. But yeah, and you'll get notified when we do these cool premieres and stuff. We'll sit and chat with you if we can. It's pretty sweet.
Usually there.
Instagram too, we have Instagram.
Yep, yeah, we have an Instagram as well. But yeah, if you guys enjoyed this video, definitely do all that stuff, and we will catch you later.